Welcome to Khanversations. I'm Muqtedar Khan, and this is a special Khanversations in which you ask the questions and I offer Khansers. आपके सवाल, मेरे जवाब. Your questions, my answers. So I have received some interesting questions, and the way you ask questions is by sending an email, either a video clip or a text, or even an audio question is welcome. You send them to askprofkhan@gmail.com. But before that, please subscribe to Khanversations and ring the bell icon. So the first question is from Sreekumar. He says, "Greetings from India, Professor Khan. In the present day situation, India is not exactly playing ball with America." You're right, Sreekumar. America is trying its best to make India a committed ally to the Indo-Pacific strategy that it has, and India is playing hard to get. So the question is, do you think India is testing the depth of its friendship with America, specifically if America can be relied upon for long-term partnership in defense? So this is an interesting question. It sort of presupposes that India has a significant advantage over the United States. So it is for America to meet the benchmarks that India is setting for friendship. But look at it from the other side. Is India proving to America that it can be a reliable ally? India has been courted for now more than a decade by the United States. The United States has helped India during its nuclear situation, mainstreaming India as a nuclear power, helping India in many other ways in the international forum, bringing in India into the Quad, in the I2U2, etc. Yet India has gone on to support Russia so vociferously in the past few weeks, and India went and bought weapons more from Russia and France. So the question remains that in spite of all the attempts that the US is making to befriend India and consistently calling India as one of the most important countries in the world, and calling India as a natural allies because both of us are democracies. So the question really is for both sides, have they done enough to convince the other that they can be a reliable partner? I think at the moment, neither India has succeeded in convincing the US that it's going to be a long-term ally, even though the US feels that it really needs India to align with itself and Japan and Australia in order to contain China and keep the Indo-Pacific a free and open arena. But the question also remains as to why India is not entirely convinced that the US is a long-term ally. So I think time only will say, and as I speak, the US Secretary of Treasury, Janet Yellen, is in India making a lot of interesting offers to India to include it in IPEF, Indo-Pacific Economic Forum, fully. And we'll see how this relationship develops. In fact, going forward, I think US-India alliance may potentially be the most significant geopolitical alliance if it happens. The next question is from Kashish. Actually, this is the second part of his question, which I had forgotten to answer in the previous edition of Your Questions, My Answers. So I'm doing it now. Kashish, I hope you'll be happy. Your question is very interesting. It says, India is dealing with a 2.5 front war, but how do we deal with the last half front? Since 2019 onwards, especially into 2020, a lot of Indian military generals were talking about India's military doctrine as one preparing to face a 2.5 front, which means that for the first time the possibility that both China and Pakistan could attack India together in combination, which means that India would have two fronts to fight a war with Pakistan and with China, and the Indian Army was proposing to develop its capabilities so that it can defeat Pakistan and hold China on one front. So in the northeast, it would hold China, and in the northwest, it would defeat Pakistan. But they also recognize that given the fact that Pakistan has the capacity to use assets inside India And to some extent, China may also have that capacity in the northeast. So it's quite possible that we might see insurgency both in the northeast as well as the northwest sides of it. So in 2019, for example, a suicide bomber killed about 40 Indian soldiers. So basically, India's war preparedness is focused on these three potential threats, and not just three threats, but three threats which will act in concert. So that is the ultimate nightmare that India is preparing for: an attack from Pakistan, an attack from China at the same time, coordinated, and at the same time, the rise of insurgencies within its borders. Fortunately, we have seen a decline in at least terrorism coming from Kashmir, and perhaps it is because India has succeeded politically and from a military perspective in containing that threat. The next question is from Dewansh Tiwari from Kanpur, Uttar Pradesh. Dewansh is pursuing a master's in history, and I wish him all the best. He is interested in world affairs. That's good news. And his question is about China and Taiwan issue. So basically, he wants to know if the US and Indian policies towards China have changed. The short answer is no. Both India and the US continue to maintain the one China policy that they've had for decades. The United States maintains what it calls as a strategic ambiguity with regards to China's claims to Taiwan. Uh, so it's theoretically it's not very clear if China were to attack Taiwan, if the U.S. would intervene militarily. If China is convinced that the U.S. will not militarily support Taiwan, then China might invade and annex Taiwan. But on the other hand, if Taiwan is convinced that if China attacks it, then the US will most definitely defend it, then that's an incentive for Taiwan to declare independence, and Taiwan will declare independence, and America will have to fight for Taiwanese independence if China takes military action. So the US has theoretically maintained this strategic ambiguity to keep status quo, so that China does not invade Taiwan and Taiwan doesn't declare independence. And so we continue with this political charade that there is only one China and one China policy is maintained. And India, even though it's not committed to any kind of defense of Taiwan, has also maintained this posture that there is only one China. Nevertheless, in the past few years, China has made some aggressive moves, especially with regards to India in Galwan and its constant threat of and use of force with regards to Taiwan. And therefore, the rhetoric coming from Washington has changed. Nancy Pelosi going to Taiwan, Biden on more than one occasion saying that the US will most definitely use force to defend Taiwan. So even though the US is saying it has not changed its policy, its rhetoric and some of its praxis has changed a little bit. And so has India. Without actually saying that we have changed our policy, India has increased its cooperation with Taiwan, and partly as a reaction and pushback against China's aggressiveness. So the signal to China is, if you get aggressive with us in one theater, we can get aggressive with you on the issue of Taiwan. The next question is from Swapnil Gedam from India. And thank you for watching all my shows. Swapnil, your question is, it's like a googly. I'm having a little bit of trouble in how to answer that. So your question, the first part says, how can India and Saudi Arabia work together to stop the rising of Islamophobia? I'm not very sure whether they're working together or even if that is on the agenda. Right now, what seems to be on the Saudi and Indian agenda basically is trade and investments. Saudi investments in India, trade and imports of Saudi oil, and of course, the large number of Indians who work in Saudi Arabia. It is quite possible that eventually there will be demand for creating a Hindu temple in Saudi Arabia and building, and I think there should be one, definitely. There are so many Hindus who serve and help build the Saudi society. They should have a temple of their own. But are they going to come together to fight Islamophobia? I'm not sure. So, for example, one of the reform agendas of MBS, the Crown Prince, who's also now the Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia, who is, by the way, visiting India day after tomorrow, uh, may not be interested in combating Islamophobia because he's trying to make his country a normal country with tourism, etc., and is trying to distance itself from the former image of Saudi Arabia as the voice of the Muslim world. So, if you remember the Nupur Sharma case, the Saudis did not take any major official position. They let Qatar and other countries speak for the Gulf Muslims. So I'm not very sure that these two countries will collaborate on the issue of Islamophobia. But I do see these two countries coming closer. And one more thing is, I'm not sure whether this government of India will recognize the fact that there is such a thing as Islamophobia in India or elsewhere in the world. And some of their friends of the current government may also oppose combating Islamophobia because they themselves might be indulging in acts which can be described as Islamophobia. So, for example, the celebration of the use of bulldozers in UP here in New Jersey created a lot of hue and cry. It was seen as Islamophobic here, and later on, the Indian Americans who organized that event had to apologize for the hateful messages that were being sent, the Islamophobic messages. And these are all supporters of the current government of India. So I'm not very sure that they will collaborate on the issue of Islamophobia. However, close relations between Saudi Arabia and India may help bring Muslims and Hindus closer. Who knows? How do you see India's foreign policy with another Muslim world, including Pakistan? Well, a lot of my shows these days are about India-Pakistan relations, so you can just visit to the Hindi playlist, and you will see a Hindi-Urdu playlist, and you will see a lot of discussions of India-Pakistan relations. What are India's expectations from the Muslim world? India wants to have good relations with everybody in the world. That includes the Muslim world. There are a huge Indian diaspora in the Muslim world. India trades with the Muslim world. A lot of India's exports go to the Muslim world. A lot of imports come from the Muslim world, especially oil. So yes, India is eager to have, and in the last 5-6 years, India has made great efforts to improve its relations, especially with Gulf countries. My last question is from Ravi Chawla. Ravi lives in Sydney. I wonder, Ravi, if you did get to watch any of the World Cup matches that are going on right now. I wish I was in Australia at this time. I would have at least, I would have liked to watch India versus Pakistan, the first match, which India won, and then the rest of the Indian matches were not very inspiring. So, thank you very much for your question. And basically, your question, you have asked several questions, but this is the one that I want to address, where you're suggesting that India would have been a better place if the British had not left in 1947. I profoundly disagree with you on that. I think India not being an independent country today would not be a good thing for any one of us. We would be occupied by a foreign power which would be extractive in nature. The British stole up over $40 trillion worth of Indian wealth. So the whole purpose of the British in India was to exploit India economically. Whatever benefits they have extended are accidental. So if they built roads, if they built railways, that was to help the empire continue its grip on India. So basically, it was like a leech that was stuck to India and sucked the blood out of India, economic blood. So for over 100 years, 90 years for the British Empire, and over another 100 years by the East India Company, India was systematically looted and exploited by the British. That's why Britain became such a rich power. I'm not sure that the British remaining in India would have been good for India. For that matter, I don't think it is good for any country not to be independent. So I disagree with you on this issue. The other question that you raised, which we will discuss later, are also very interesting. So thank you very much to all of you for sending these wonderful questions. Please send me more questions to askprofkhan@gmail.com. It's a special account only for questions. And do please subscribe to Khanversations and ring the bell icon and share this video with your friends.